Last learning objective for this chapter, comparing plants and animal cells. They are mostly the same in terms of the structures that they have, but they do have some very important differences. So, plants and animals have most of the same organelles, but they have very different jobs to do. Plants and animals very different from each other, so they're structurally very different. So here's a typical animal cell. Well, I shouldn't say it's a typical animal cell. It's a generalized animal cell. The difference being you'll never see a cell that looks exactly like this one that has a flagellum and these microvilli and all of these other things in here arranged just like this. But it's an approximation. And you'll notice that it has those things that we mentioned. It's got the nucleus, it's got the smooth and rough ER, Golgi apparatus, it's got the centrosome, which remember plants do not have that. It's got mitochondria that have all been sectioned here so they don't look like the kidney beans, but you can see the inner membranes as well. Lysosomes help digest things, as do peroxisomes. So that's your animal cell. Plant cells, first thing you'll notice right off that's different is it looks like it's inside of a box. Kind of looks a little bit like a coffin. Ooh, creepy from the shape of it. But that's a cell wall. Plants have cell walls. Plants, as you probably are well aware, do not move like animals do. They grow and they produce new, but when the only way that they move is by growth, by adding new cells. They don't have muscles, they don't swim, they don't fly. So a big part of that is because they have these cell walls that are made out of cellulose, like we talked about in chapter 2. Another thing you'll notice is that they have chloroplasts. Chloroplasts help them to photosynthesize, but lo and behold, they also have mitochondria. So big misconception amongst biology students when they're learning is that plants don't have mitochondria. They absolutely do, because they need to metabolize the sugar that they're producing. They don't produce the sugar for us. They produce the sugar in such abundance that we can live off of their surpluses. But they're not just there to do stuff for us. So they need their own mitochondria to metabolize the sugar that they're producing, as well as having those chloroplasts. Another thing you have in a plant cell is this large central vacuole. So remember, a vacuole is kind of a big bubble of membrane, and they need to have that central vacuole because they need to keep the plasma membrane, the membrane that forms the boundary of the cell, pressed up against the cell wall. You don't want this cell membrane tearing away from the cell wall. It'd be like pulling the wallpaper off of your walls, and you don't want to do that. So the central vacuole, it's a lot easier to adjust the size of that central vacuole versus adding on more plasma membrane if the cell has enough water, too much water, not enough water. Adjusting the size of the central vacuole kind of takes up the space to make sure that the cell membrane stays pressed up against the cell wall so that it can communicate with adjacent cells. All right, so plants versus animal. Plants have chloroplasts. They have that cellulose cell wall. They have a large central vacuole. But plants, as far as the number of types of cells they produce, not very diverse. Not very diverse. So maybe on the order of, at most, like 20 is a guess of the number of different types of cells you might find in a plant. Animals have no cell walls, but a whole lot more diversity in cell types. Just in your own body, you have on the order of 200 different types of cells. So many different types of cells that make up your skin, your heart, your lungs, your liver, your eyes. So much diversity in different types of cells in animals. And then centrosomes. Animals have centrosomes while plants don't. Again, mitochondria in both. That's very important. Okay, so that is about all I need to tell you about how plants and animal cells are different. Fundamentally, they have got a lot of things in common in terms of their organelles, except for those few things that I have listed here. Okay? Oh, here we go. Both have a nucleus, cell membrane, mitochondria, cytoskeleton, vacuoles, not always just the large central vacuole, but other types of vacuoles, and an endomembrane system. Okay, so there's your both have list as well. All right, so that brings chapter 3 to a close, and I'll catch you on the next one.